While most of the plot of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining may seem straightforward at first glance, the more one thinks about it, the more things start to seem strange. Details that might have seemed superficial turn out to be more profound, and what we took for granted crumbles. But for me, it was even worse than that. Even when I thought I could explain most of it, there was still an aspect of the film that bothered me. A terrible feeling that I found hard to pinpoint. This quote from the book Stanley Kubrick, director, might serve better to illustrate my intuition. Quote, Kubrick also believed that films connect subtly with the subconscious. Meaning, he said, may be found in the sensation of a thing, not its explanation. What is the sensation of The Shining then? That Kubrick wanted to affect the subconscious in his movies is clear. Quoting him, if the film stirs the emotions and penetrates the subconscious of the viewer, if it stimulates, however inchoately, his mythological and religious yearnings and impulses, then it has succeeded. Furthermore, in writing the script for The Shining, he relied on a book called The Use of Enchantment by Bruno Bettelheim, which is a psychoanalytic study of fairy tales. Here, the main benefit of fairy tales is that they can directly affect the subconscious of the child and help him realize things in a way that a direct treatment would not. On first view of The Shining, most people might not detect many of the tricks the movie plays, but nonetheless, they might have felt their eerie effects. By paying attention, one begins noticing some of them, like the famous window in Stuart Ullman's office, which should look to the inside of a hotel, but instead shows the exterior. These tricks of perception are meant to affect subconsciously, even if one doesn't notice them, and the movie is full of them. The most powerful of this is the bar scene. It's by analyzing this scene that I posit one can find that hidden sensation, and thus the meaning of The Shining. In this scene, Jack enters the Golden Room after Wendy accuses him of hurting Danny. With the bar being empty of liquor, a mirror reflects him in the back of the shelves. As the camera switches to Jack, he has his face covered with his hands. He then slides them and opens his eyes, and is now staring directly at the camera, locking eyes with the viewer. This has a shocking effect, partly because as a rule, in fiction films, the actors are not supposed to look directly at the camera, as it breaks the fourth wall, implicating the viewer. Thus, it surprises but also unnerves the viewer by having to confront the gaze of Jack. And in this confrontation lies the secret sensation. When Jack opens his eyes and sees in front of him, he should be looking at his reflection. But since he's staring directly at the camera, he also locks eyes with the viewer. Thus, we take the place of Jack's reflection. The sensation is that we are Jack's mirror image, and this is The Shining's true terror. It scares us not by making us identify with the victims, but by making us identify with the killer, Jack. To rub that sensation in, we can see how Jack, or Kubrick for that matter, delights in the revelation, as if Jack were playing peekaboo, and then delightfully laughs at our scared reaction. And this is the main theme that is manifested in many ways throughout the film. To confront our evil reflection, the mirror shining on the things we've been overlooking, from where the overlook takes its meaning. The genius aspect of it is that it doesn't do it only through the plot, but also at a meta level, meant to affect the viewer in a similar way. making viewers confront their own darkness. There's a couple of other moments in the movie where Jack rapidly glances at the camera, repeating this motif and furthering the association of Jack's dark impulses with the viewer, as if he were winking at us. Both are when he's talking about murdering his family. The first, when he confesses he dreamed of killing them while sleeping at the desk. The second, when talking to Grady in the red bathroom of the Golden Room. But it's not only through these fourth wall breakings that the identifying effect is meant to be achieved or justified, but by a more sinister process, making the viewer hate Wendy, and in a way, also Danny. We can start with a Stephen King quote, author of the novel The Shining, that represents part of what Wendy is meant to convey. Stephen King said, Stanley Kubrick's version of Wendy Torrance is one of the most misogynistic characters ever to be put to film. He said, quote, "She's just there to scream and be stupid," end of quote. Wendy's character is misogynistic precisely because that was the point, to make us hate her. We can complement with another of Kubrick's statements. Quote, "The novel pictures her as a much more self-reliant and attractive woman, but these qualities make you wonder why she has put up with Jack for so long. Shelley seemed to be exactly the kind of woman that would marry Jack and be stuck with him." End of quote. Wendy is thus meant to be uglier, dumber, and less self-reliant. However, there are many other parts that direct the viewer towards disliking her. The most glaring is that Wendy is complicit with Jack's abuse of Danny and ignores it, thus also partaking in the overlooking of the evil going on.
Well, it was just one of those things, purely an accident.
But we also see Wendy's disregard for Danny in some other scenes, like when she smokes as he eats his breakfast next to her, or when they're watching a movie in the hotel, The Summer of 42, an adult movie about a teenager sexually attracted to an older married woman, whose explicit sexual and Oedipal message would certainly not be apt for Danny, or how she brings up the Donner Party story, with Danny sitting back in the car. Her fascination with horror stories is also meant to comment on the glib and callous viewing of horror films, or when Jack says she'll be fascinated by the story of Grady's murders because she's a
confirmed ghost story and horror film addict.
By the end, she has to confront all that she has been ignoring or belittling. This is especially represented when she sees the ghost scene of the bear costume person giving fellatio to another of the guests, which harkens to Danny's abuse. Or where she previously saw nothing wrong, she now sees the skeletons. But what about Danny? While I don't think the film explicitly makes us hate Danny directly, there is a most telling aspect that comes from Stanley Kubrick, making the cast watch the movies Eraserhead, Rosemary's Baby, and The Exorcist to put them, quote, in their right frame of mind, end of quote. And what did these films have in common? That in all three of them, the child is a monster and the father betrays, kills, or abandons it. Thus, the, quote, right frame of mind, end of quote, is that of Jack's hatred for Danny, who maybe even sees him as a monster due to his powers. Maybe Kubrick had something similar in mind regarding how he approached his working relationship with Shelley Duvall, which is now remembered as infamously harsh. The crew was reportedly also told to ignore and isolate Shelley.
And it is 25-1.
Well, I don't sympathize with Shelley.
You don't sympathize with Shelley.
It doesn't help you when you
Yes, it does. It does.
This is why, under this, quote, frame of mind, end of quote, Wendy and Danny are the monsters of the film. If the protagonist with whom we are meant to identify is Jack, then the antagonists are Wendy and Danny, who are stopping him from reaching his potential. Kubrick wanted to revolutionize the horror genre and had been thinking about it for a while. He wanted to make a film that would truly scare people. By making us identify with the monster, he switches the obvious tropes of horror movies and shows the dark aspect of the superficiality of the genre through Wendy, the certified horror movie addict who would be absolutely fascinated hearing the story about the greatest killings. It plays on the viewer who goes to see horror films with a glib entertainment attitude, as if Kubrick were saying, "Oh, so you like horror films? I'll show you horror. I'll show you what's inside of yourself."
Here's Johnny.
Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, I'd love to read your comments, and as always, liking and subscribing would help a lot. If you want to further support the channel so I can keep working on making videos, or want to read the full text analysis of The Shining, explaining all the other themes and symbols of the movie, as well as the ending, you can head on over to my Patreon in the links below.